And then, yeah. So now it's recording, so we can start. Welcome to today's tutorial. This is going to be the second part. We'll be going through the implementation of last year's practical, right? And it's very similar to this year's practical. I can't give you the solution for this year's practical for obvious reasons, right? Because you guys are the ones supposed to do the practical. But I can do a similar example, which is this practical, which is last year's practical, to try and demonstrate on how you can solve the practical, right? So write a C++ program so that whenever the program runs, it presents the user with the menu to select one of two options. So it gives the user a menu, right? It selects one of two options. The program stops after the selected option has finished executing. So it says that the program stops after the selected option has finished executing. So basically it means that when a user chooses an option, it runs that option. That's basically what it's supposed to do. So we have two options, option A, option B, right? So we need to do that. So option A, remember in the previous tutorial, we talked about the if statements and how they work. So on the switch statement and the conditional operator. So that's what we're going to apply today. We're going to apply them to solve last year's practical. So let me go to my code. So option A, ask the user to input, right? So input the accuracy score of a machine learning model. So that's what we must ask the user to enter. After they enter a score, we output a specific option for the score. So let's see how we can do this, right? For those who watched the previous tutorial when I was talking about if statements, remember I said you can represent a range in a switch statement. I was right. So for example, let's say I have int marks, and then I said let's say your marks is 98%, and then we have a switch statement that's going to give you output based on your marks. So this is how I do my switch statements like this. So so the way you did it, you do it right, to specify a range. You specify the starting point, and then you put a space, and then two dots, and then a space, and then the end, right? And it includes both ends, it's inclusive. So let's say you want to say if the student got marks between 0% and 49%, then you should do something. I know it looks weird. It's a weird syntax, but this is how you can specify the range in a switch statement. And then you should output failed, right? It means that you failed the module. And then the \n, when you put it within the double quotes, it means the exact same thing as this, as n line. It does the exact same thing. But then make sure you output what you want to output, and then after the last letter of your output. So I want it to display a failed. So the last letter is D. So after D, that's when I put in the \n. So this is what we call a new line character. So let's say your marks are in between the range 0 space 50 to 74. Come on. Then it should just output passed. It's just a basic pass. There's nothing too fancy. Then the last case would be from 75 to 100. It means that you passed, but with a distinction. So passed with distinction. Distinction, \n, semicolon. Remember, the semicolon is like a full stop in English. So in C++, if you don't put full stops, which is the semicolon, it's gonna shout at you. It's not as understanding as people. Because when we're talking on WhatsApp and we're chatting with your friend and they're catching up, you're like, yo, show me, hey, this and that. I have news to share with you. You're not worried about Chomi understand what is Chomi knowing English before you can send a message. You don't actually care about whether you're capitalizing the first letter or you're doing this or there's a full stop or there's a comma. You don't even care. That's how we are as human beings. But the computer is not that lenient. It's not that understanding at all. So if you forget that semicolon, it's gonna scream at you and say that's incorrect. Is it three? Did I? No, it's two. Okay, I guess. Oh, I guess it's a modern, but this is how you can do it. I think it's the C++ version that I chose, but this is how you'd specify a range. I once used it. It did work. I'm not sure if it's the version of C++ that I'm using, which is the problem, but it does work. Let me choose default expected token. But yeah, it did work. I think I don't know which year I was doing this thing, but I once used it. Yeah, but then I just forgot which C++ version. Remember, I'm using. Remember, you to check the version or to set the compiler, you go to settings and then compiler. We're using the 17. Yeah, I think maybe it's the latest one. I think this feature is for new C++, if I'm not mistaken. So it's fine, you can leave it, but it's a cool trick to know when you're practicing that, oh, it is possible. So that's just something that's possible. So I'm just going to remove that, but just know that's possible. Only in C++. In Java or other languages, it's not possible. So let's ask the user for input. So in order for us to for them to enter the accuracy score, you see, it's accuracy what? Score. So what is the data type of the accuracy score? That's the thing that we need to ask ourselves. If you look at the table you're given, it shows the accuracy as a percent, meaning it's an integer, right? You see, it says from 0 to 50. They didn't say from 0.0 to 50.0. If they had said, put it in that way, then you'd know that the data type should be a double. So that's why we're going to reach the conclusion that this should be an integer. So it's called accuracy score. So I'm going to declare that variable int accuracy score, right? Or you can just do it like this. You can just say score, right? Like this. And then just put a comment to say this is the accuracy score. And then you can initialize it to give it a value. Say, let's say it's equals to 0, right? If we're just going to give it the value of 0, just nothing, right? Because the value we're getting it from the user. But it's important to initialize variables. Why? Because if you don't initialize them, there might be junk inside the variable. So let me show you an example. So let's say we just created this variable and we didn't initialize it. Let's see what is inside the variable. It's a random value that I know. Lucky enough, it's a 0, but most of the time it's not 0. It could be maybe 2 million or something like that. So you always need to initialize your variables, even if it looks stupid, like just initializing it to 0. It's important for the computer because sometimes you might get the incorrect result because you simply didn't initialize your variable. Initializing a variable just means you're giving it an initial value or a starting value, even though you know you're going to change it later on. So we're going to get the input of the accuracy score. So we need to ask the user to enter the accuracy score of a machine learning model. So I'm just going to copy that because I want to ask that question. But before we do that, right, there's something that we need to understand very well. The program actually starts here at the top before we go down there. So you should, it says when the program runs, it presents the user with a menu, you see, with a menu to select to one of two options. So option A would be ask the user to enter the accuracy score and then use the use the output to output, use the score to output an appropriate message. So we have two options, option A, option B, and then option B will, yeah, we'll do option B later, one thing at a time. So let's do this. Let's create the options, right? To create options, we need to do it. Let me remove this variable first. So C out, then we output our options, right? So let's say option A, option A, I don't know, whatever way you want to write it. So let me say option A, enter accuracy score, right? That's option A. Then semicolon, and then I'm just going to put a backslash n there so that it saves me time. I don't want to type ENDL. That's going to take a lot of time. So it's also going to involve a lot of code. So this is a simpler way to write it. Then I'm going to output option B. Um, do, 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 do. Option B. So ask the user to enter the number of VPL exercises they completed throughout the semester. And then if the number of completed exercises is less than 5, output the more VPLs you successfully complete, the higher chances of a pass. Else, output keep it up. So we just are gonna, this is number two is up, option B, right? It's about VPL exercise. It's about entering the number of VPL exercises. So I'm gonna say enter number of VPL exercises. That's option number two, right? And then semicolon is very important. And then I'm gonna put a backslash n there. You might not understand why it's important to put the backslash n. Let me show you why. So let me not put any backslash n. What happens is that it's going to look weird. You see how it looks, right? It starts from there and then it continues and then so on, becomes a problem. So that's why I put a backslash n here. You see here after score, I put a backslash n, which means that the next thing that's going to be sent to my output should start on its own separate line. So let me do that. Let me put back that backslash n, and then I'm going to build and run again. So you see now it's better, right? Because I told C++ that after the score, put an end of line character. It just means the whole line stops here, which means anything that else that you want to output will be forced to be displayed on the next line. So there's other options, right? So I'm also going to put another backslash n here and then save. But before I output my options, I need to also output a message and say, choose choose one of the options below. To just let the user know what they should do. Because if I just output there's option A, there's option B, what you see that it's hard to really understand what that means. So that's why it's important for you to tell the user what's going on. Like, for example, choose one of the options below so that they know, oh, I must choose an option. So you have to inform them. It's good to let the user know what's going on. So you see, there's my text. Choose one of the options below, which is there's options here. So option A is this. Option B is that, right? So those are the two options. So we need to handle the two options. So for the options, right, we typically use the switch statement because the switch statement it's actually very useful when it comes to choosing options. You see, when you're having an option-based um an option-based practical or or an app, right? That is options. Switch statements are very good in that. So we can apply the switch statement there. So we told the user to choose one of the two options, but we haven't showed an option for them to enter, right? There must be an option for them to enter or to give us to enter the option to choose. like option A, option B, they need to choose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a comment here and say, ask the user to, okay, what is this? I'm going to say capture the input from the user. So I'm going to store the choice that the user chooses. I'm going to store it. And the way I want to store the choice, right? Remember, it's option A, option B. So that means I need to input the character or the char, which is the letter. So another thing that you need to understand, when you have letters like A, B, C, or let's say even just the bracket like this, they are stored inside a data type called char. It's called char in short because in full it means character or a letter. It's a synonym for letter. So in programming, we don't say a letter, we say it's a character. So since it's a character, it's called a character, that's why C++ has the data type called char, which tells C++ that this variable stores a character. So I'm going to create a char variable. So char, it's pronounced char, not car. So don't butcher the pronunciation. It's actually pronounced, you should pronounce it as char. Even though the full word is character, but you should, when it's like this, you say it's a char. So I'm going to say char option because the user is going to enter an option. Then I'm going to initialize it to nothing. So I'm going to say is equals to. So to a character, how do you store a character? How do you store a character in C++? Remember a string, we store it using double quotes like this, right? A char or a character, since it's a single character or a single letter, we use single quotes. And then in between single quotes, we put in one character or one value. So we can say this is equals to A or a capital letter A or N or the bracket. We can put only one character. Do not put something like AB. AB wouldn't be stored. It's going to crash. So let me show you. If I try to build this, okay, it did work, but it shouldn't work. I don't know why is it not. Let me build again. Yeah, this is wrong. It's supposed to crash because this is not one thing. This is a whole list of letters. Should only be one value in between there. But then for now, I just want it to be set to nothing, right? How do I initialize it to nothing? We use what we call a null. So how do you represent the null? It's backslash and then you put 0. So this means it's null. In a way, for those who don't really understand what's going on, it's like, for example, int a, I initialize it to 0. So it's like char, the equivalent of 0 for chars, it's null. You set it to null. It's like setting it to 0 or to nothing. So I need to set it to that because remember what we talked about. Initializing variables or giving variables initial values is very important. So once we have the variable option to store the option that the user is going to enter, what am I going to do? I'm going to say cin, which is called for common input, and then look at the direction. The direction is very important. You see it's from left going to the right-hand side because I'm taking it from there and then putting it into some variable here called option. So let me output, right? After receiving the input here, right? After capturing it, then I've just displayed to show you that I actually do capture the output, the input. So see out, I'm gonna say you entered followed by space, excuse me, followed by space, and then I insert again, and then I insert once more and line character. So this will output you entered followed by a space and the option, what will be stored in this variable. So remember, a computer reads from top to bottom. So it's going to start here, output this, output that, then it creates that variable, it stores the input. Then once I've gotten the input from the user, then now I display it. So things should be done sequentially. in a sequential order. So it's very important. So you see now it waits for the user to enter an answer, right? Because I use cin. So I'm going to say, let me enter Y, right? Even though it's an incorrect option, but let me enter Y. And then I press enter. You see that it tells me what I entered. It says you entered, followed by that space right here, and my option, which is Y, which is this that I entered. So that means my variable is actually storing the input from the user. So that's very important to know. So since we're 100% sure that it stores the input from the user, the next step is to what? Handle or handle for each option, right? So basically handle each option. So remember the practical. It says that if you chose option A, do something for option A. If you entered option B, do something for option B. So let's see how we're going to approach it. So if you look at this part, remember we talked about switch cases not allowing you to put ranges, right? It's very tricky. It's very hard to put ranges there. So the only thing that we can use here in option A is an if statement, especially an if statement, because we have multiple ranges. So I cannot specify because do you know why I say it's impossible for you to put a range in a switch statement? Because if you have, let's say something like this, switch marks, right? And then you have, let's say case one. What case one means, right? If I didn't explain it thoroughly last time in the previous tutorial, case one, this actually asks C++ this question. It says, is marks equal to one? That's what it actually means. So you see that I cannot put a range there because it checks for one value at a time. If I wanted to check for multiple values, right, for a whole range, this is what I would do. Let me show you why we can't use the switch statement here. I would have to start from zero. I count from 0 to 50. Remember what we talked about in the previous tutorial, that you can put multiple cases in for and then do one thing for all those cases before you put a break. So you see, I'm listing them one by one, case one, case two, case three, but then I'm starting from 0 up until 50. You can imagine how many lines are those, right? So it's definitely not an option here. We can't use that to handle this part where we're checking the accuracy. We can't use it there. It's definitely not an option there. But we have this part where we have two options to choose from, which is option A and option B. So I can use the switch statement for that part, because remember what I talked about. A switch statement, its main use is for when you have options. When it's anything that is an option, just know switch statement is the perfect thing to use there. Or choices, maybe the English that the word that I've used, many people might not really understand, but it's like a choice. When you have a question for code that involves choose from this or choose from that, a switch statement is 100% perfect for that, for solving that problem. So that's why I'm using a switch statement here and I'm passing that option. And look at the order. Guys, listen, order is very important. Let me show you why it's important. Let's say I didn't understand order and then I want to output what the users entered here. I'm going to say you entered space and then the option, and then I'm confident. I'm like, yeah, I killed it. But you don't understand that this thing reads from top to bottom. So it's going to reach line 14, right? You see, there's the line number here. Line 14, and then it initializes it to nothing. So option has nothing. Then you go to line 15. You're displaying here, but then remember option in the previous line, it was initialized to nothing, and it's still nothing. The only time option has something, it's at line 16. So this output is going to be weird. So let me show you. So you see what I was talking about. And then let's say I enter T. Okay, let me do this. I think you guys, it's not visible enough if I don't put an end of line character. So let me put an end of line character and then build. So you see what I was talking about. He says you entered, but I don't see because it's null. It's nothing. And you didn't put the output statement in at the right place. So you displayed before getting the value, which is incorrect. Because in the next line, that's when you enter the option. But then you've already displayed and you displayed nothing, which so it assumes that the user entered nothing. But wait, I entered B. So how come it thinks I didn't enter anything? Because of the order in which you are using putting your statements. So order is very important. That's why I get the input from the user first. Then I check what the user has entered using a switch statement. So I'm going to have case. Remember, chars or characters, the way they work is you use single quotes. So if you want to check for the letter A, you have to put it in single quotes like this and say A, right? And then break, and then case B, and then break like this, right? But then it's a problem. So let me show you why it's a problem. You chose option A, right? And then backslash N. And then I'm gonna put an output there and say that which does something similar, but then it says you entered option B. I want to show you something about capital letters and small letters. Here I'm checking if the value of this thing here, of this variable here, option, if it's equals to a small letter A, that's what I'm checking. But what if the user enters a capital letter A? It should be correct, but you're gonna see something weird. It's not gonna output anything. Let me show you. So let me enter uppercase letter A. You see, no output. And then you're gonna ask yourself, but why? Because I entered A, option A, I chose A. No, you chose A, but you didn't accommodate for capital letters. You only accommodated for small letters. So let me show you. Let me use a small letter. You'll see that it's gonna work. Small letter A. You see that it works now when I use small letter. So you'd have to list them. And remember how I told you how to list. You just put cases after another. It just means it's this or this, output this. So it has to be one of those in the list. So I'll say uppercase letter A like this. And then here I'm gonna say case and then uppercase letter B like this, right? So what this means, right? It means check if my option, the value inside this variable called option, if it's equals to capital letter A, or if it's equals to small letter A, or if it's equals to small letter B, or if it's equals to capital letter B. So that means all I accommodated for all possible options. So I'm going to open this and say, let me enter capital letter A. You see, it works. Let me enter small letter A. It still works because I accommodated for both cases. We call them cases because it's uppercase or lowercase, so cases. And then small letter B, it accepts it. And then uppercase letter B, you see it accepts it. So now it accommodates both cases, but our code is still incomplete. You might ask yourself, why is it incomplete? Because I didn't handle for the case when the user enters something that we do not know. Remember a user, imagine you give your granny this application and say, Coco, bengicela uyirane le program. Coco doesn't know what C++ is. So Coco might come here and say, and enter 7, and then she presses enter. So you see that there's something that we call unpredictable behavior from a user. A user can do something that's unpredictable. So we need to also handle for that. So that's where the default part come. The default means by default, meaning if it's none of these, do this. So the default, it's like an else in an if statement. So else, what should happen? So let me also put a break. And then else, what should happen? You should output incorrect option chosen, right? It outputs, it tells you that you chose the incorrect option. So let's run it and test it now. Let's see. Let's say you gave your grandma or your grandmother this program and then she enters 8 and then presses end. It's like, oh, incorrect option chosen. So that means I did the wrong thing. But then it doesn't really fully explain. You can make the message a bit longer and say, please choose, and then you say A or B. No, please choose, not please choose, please enter. Please enter A or B. So I'm going to build and run it again and then enter something incorrect. So let's say I enter P. You see, now the error is clear. So number one, it tells me what's going on. Incorrect option chosen. That means you chose the wrong thing. Then it offers a suggestion or help. Please enter A or B. So that's important to the user. You need to let the user know. So I'm going to close and then I'm going to go back to my code. So I'm going to delete this and then delete this. And then what I'm going to do, right, in order to group, if you want to group something, right, if you can have a lot of lines in per case, you can put curly braces like this. So that's what I'm going to do because I'm going to have a lot of code because I'm going to need to handle the separate options, right? I need to handle case A and option B. The default part is fine. You leave it as it is, but it's supposed to be an error. So you're going to use CR or CERR, which just means it's the common errors, right? For errors. So this is the stream that you use to output errors. And then I'm going to go back. So let's do option A. Remember, we're doing one option at a time. Remember what I talked about when you looked at this thing. When you see a round bracket, it means excluding that number. When you see a square bracket, it means inclusive. It includes that number. So that's an important thing to understand. So let's do that. So how would you represent this in code? That's the very important thing to do. So we talked about this. If you watched the previous tutorial, that's why it's important to attend. So how would you represent this? So you have 0 to 50, right? And it's inclusive on both ends, the upper bound and the lower bound. I'm taking you back to maths now. So we can write it in this way. Let's say let x be represent our bounds, right? Or our range. So it can be represented like this and say x is like this, right? So meaning x is in between 0 and 50, right? And in the previous tutorial, I told you how to write this in programming. You can divide it into portions. So you can take this part here first, right? And then you can take the second part on its own here, right? So in programming, you write it this way. You say x, right? Remember, you can't read, you can't say 0 is less than or equals to x. That's not how you read it. You read starting with the variable. So x is greater or equals to 0. So I can rewrite it like this and say x is greater than or equals to 0 and x is less than or equals to 50. So that's what that means. So how do you write it in C++? How would you change this to C++? So to change it to C++, we'd have to change this, right, to C++, change this in C++, change this to C++. So how do you change that? Greater than or equals to, you write it as this, greater than, followed by an equal sign, like this. And then less than or equals to, you write it as less than, followed by an equal sign, right? Something like, is it this? Yeah, something like this. So okay, I think it's not a bit visible here. So let's go back to, let me open, which part was that? Yeah. So you see, there's the less than equals to, you see, less than equals to, greater than equals to. So that's how you'd represent it in C++. How do you represent and in C++? It's two ampersands. They call them ampersands. So it's these two things on your keyboard. When you put them together, they are equivalent to saying and. And then, so now how in full, how would the statement look like in C++? It will look like this. You would have x is greater than or equal to 0. So let me erase eraser. Yeah, just give me a minute. I need to keep, yeah. Once my finances are okay, I need to buy a touchscreen laptop so that I can, makes it easier to teach and draw and do diagrams, demonstrations, and things like that. But then the combos are not communicating yet. So for now, this is what you have to go through. So I'm done with that. So let me choose my brush again and then go back. So, and remember we talked about and, you write it as like this. So ampersand, ampersand like this. And then X is, and then, yeah, X is less than or equals to 50. So this is how you translate that into C++, right? So this is the final product, right? And then you can think about all the other ranges. So it should be pretty straightforward now. I hope I managed to convince you that it's not that hard if you really think about it. So let me close that paint. I've demonstrated. So let's do the conditions, right? Let's do our if statements. So you see that there's multiple if statements or questions. Remember, if statement, the way it works, we have a part for the question. So you see that there's multiple questions and they are linked. So therefore, if they are linked, I shouldn't put separate if statements. I should use an if statement because it's for one variable. So that means it's all linked. So I'm going to go to my case A. And then for case A, remember what should happen in case A. Before we start, we need to have the actual score. So we need to ask the user to enter the score first. So option A tells you to ask the user to enter the accuracy score. So let's do that. So ask for accuracy score. So we're going to ask the user for the accuracy score. But before we ask the user for the accuracy score, I need to create a variable, give it as a value of 0, then ask the user. So I need to send out output. So cout, and then I'm going to say enter accuracy score, colon, and then a space, and then semicolon. So I'm not going to put in, I know you are used to putting \n. No, I don't want to do that. I actually wanted to leave it on the same line so that when I ask for input from the user, when I ask for input, they're going to start typing from there. So let me show you what I mean. And then we use cin to get the input. So let's say we choose option A. So you see, after choosing option A, you see where it stops. This is what I wanted. I want it to ask me here, not in the next line. So that's why I don't put that \n. Then I can enter my score, let's say 98, something like that, and then enter. For now, it does nothing, but it does do what I wanted, what I expected it to do. So I don't put the \n here because I want the cursor or this line that keeps on blinking. I want it to be on the same line. I don't want it to be on a new line. So here, you see this part here. You see what this part does here, right? This part over here. It takes what you're typing. So what you're typing is stored in this variable on the left-hand side. And then it transfers it into this variable on the right-hand side, which is int score. So you need to really understand that. So after we're done asking for the score, then now we can output a message, right? So how do we output the message? We need to do if statements because you see that for the accuracy, there's multiple conditions. So let's start with the first with the first question. So it says if accuracy is greater than or equals to 0 and is less than or equals to 50. That's what it means because remember the square brackets, it's inclusive. So let's do that. So it means if okay, let me do this. So we need to put in here the question that we are asking. So what is the question? So the question that we're asking is that is score greater than or equals to 0 and is score also less than or equals to 50? And I'm using less than or equals to because it's inclusive. It includes the 50. I'm also using greater than or equals to here because it includes the 0. Because if you check the question paper, they put in square brackets on both sides because it means inclusive. So you need to remember your maths. So if you forgot, this is the time to go revise. So I'm just going to put brackets around it just for readability. It doesn't make any difference, but it's for readability so that you understand that, oh, we start by checking this, then we check this, then remember what the end does, right? It returns true only if and only if the only if we have true and true. That's the only time it returns true, if both statements are true. So what's going to happen, right? Remember what I told you. These operators I think they're called comparison. It's not, is it comparison operators? Yeah, I'm not sure. Forgot the right name for it. But these operators that we use to compare, they return true or false. So it's going to run, check the statement, and then return true or false. And then check the statement, return, let's say maybe return false. So true and false gives you what? False. So that means this won't run. That means it's going to skip. So that's pretty much what it does behind the scenes. But we need to write it in this way so that C++ does the rest, right? Then if C++ did this, right, then we should output a message. So let's output the message. So let's copy the message from our practical. They say the message is low accuracy. And then I'm going to copy it. And then within my string, I paste it there. But then remember, I want my output to be neat. So I'm going to put a \n there. Or you can just say ENDL. That's still fine. And then we're pretty much going to sort of like repeat this thing multiple times. So to save time, right, I'm going to copy and paste. You shouldn't do that. I know what I'm doing, so I'm going to copy and paste. So I'm going to have an else if here, and then have another else if, and then have another else if. I'm going to have multiple else if, but I don't know how many. So let me leave the ones that I have for now. So I'm going to check. So the second question, right, or the second range is, remember we've already included 50 here. So that means it starts from 50, meaning greater than 50, but not greater than or equals to. It's just greater than 50, but it's less than or equals to 70 because 70 is inclusive, it's included. So I'm going to say from greater than 50, because we've already included 50 here. So if we try to include it again here, it makes no sense. So greater than 50, but less than or equals to 70. And then I go back to my message, and then I copy the message for that range. If score is within that range, I need to output that message. So I'm gonna delete everything till there, and then paste. So room for improvement. So that's perfect. So this takes experience. You can only copy and paste if you have experience. If you don't take those chances. So since we've included 70 in the previous question, in the next question, we exclude it. You see that it's excluded. There's the round bracket, meaning excluding 70, but it's from 70, meaning it's greater than 70, but it's less than or equals to 90. So I need to do that. So before I do that, let me copy the message. So good accuracy, your model is performing well. Copy. So it needs to start from greater than 70, but less than or equals to 90. And then here I need to delete this and replace it with the, okay. You see why copying and pasting is not always good. Why is it doing that? Okay. Good accuracy, your model is performing well. Okay. \n, and then the semicolon is there. Yeah. So sometimes you need to be careful when you're copying and pasting. Oh yeah, I also copied this. Yeah, that's why. So don't copy and paste. Just type it. And then the next one is from 90, but excluding 90, meaning greater than 90, but less than or equals to 100. So I'm going to go back here and say greater than 90, but less than or equals to 100, right? So I think that's very good. That's excellent quality. So excellent accuracy, copy the message, and then replace the string with the actual message. So there's the message. And then there's my changes, right? So so that we are done. That's basically it. You're done with option A. That's what you have to do for your practical, and for option A, you're done. So let me build and run so that we see. So let's choose option A, right? Because that's the one that we've solved. So let's say I enter 67, press enter. It says moderate accuracy, room for improvement. Let's check in which range is 67 in. It's in this range. So you see it's outputting the right message. So let's do excellent. Let's put 98%. So in order to run it again, I need to close and then go back and build and run, and then enter option A. Let's say we enter, or let's say enter 99. You should say excellent. That's the output that I'm expecting. So enter, which is exactly the output. So excellent accuracy, well done. Then I close. So we're done with option A. So that's it. There's nothing more to add. We're done with option A. So now we're going to option B, which is the easier option, to be honest. It's very easy. Should take you less than a few seconds to do it. So you need to ask the user to enter the number of VPL exercises. So let's ask that question. So I'm gonna create a variable first to store the number of VPL exercises. And a number is, in order to represent a number, right? It has to be an integer. You cannot use a double. You can't count in doubles. For example, if you're counting your pencils or your things, you can't count in terms of doubles. You can't do that. You have to count in terms of integers. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and stuff, right? So I know that the data type that I need to choose has to be an integer. So int, and then I'm going to call it number of exercises, right? Exercises, or you can call it num exercises, but I'm going to call it number of exercises, and then I initialize it to 0. And then I write a comment which explains what exercises it stores. So it stores the number of VPL exercises. so that if I look at my code 10 years from now, I'm going to know what it was supposed to do or what it was calculating. So int number of exercises is equals to 0, right? Then we actually get the input. So now I need to output the message first because there's no point. Do you know why a message is important? Let me show you why a message is important. So let's just get the input, right? Like this. And then life is good, right? We are done, right? So let's do it. Option B. You see the problem? Do you see the problem? There's no question. I don't know what I'm supposed to enter. I don't even know whether the entering has started. So that's why I always display text to tell the user what they should do. So see out and then tell them they should enter the number of VPL exercises and then colon space. And then I'm going to do it just like the previous option. I'm not going to put a backslash n or an end of line character because I want them to input the value immediately after this text, after this output. Then we store the number here. So we are transferring the number from the keyboard to our variable. That's what this line does here. Yeah, I know programming is powerful. It's a very interesting field because you can do a lot of powerful things. So they completed VPL exercises, they completed throughout the semester. If the number of completed exercises is less than 5, you should output the more exercises you do, blah, blah, blah. So we should output that whole string. And then else, keep it up. So remember the instructions were practical. They said you should use at least one switch statement, switch case structure. We used that. Make use of the if else statement. We used that. So the only thing that's left is what? The conditional operator. And I also thought about it way before even using the process of elimination. Even though it was actually the last structure that we haven't used or used in this practical, I knew that that's the one I would choose because it makes sense. Because remember how a conditional operator works. You have a question here. You're going to have your question here and then followed by a question mark because it's a question. And then here it does something when true. So this is when that question is true. And then you put a colon and then you do something else when the condition is false. And then semicolon. So you actually return something. The ternary operator, right? You don't put this in output statement here. You don't say see out. No, because the way a ternary operator works, right? You're supposed to return something. So let's say 10 or a string high. You have to return a value, something. And if you look at this question, the option B, the way it works, it means you're gonna ask the question of is the number of exercises less than 5? If the number of exercises is indeed less than 5, then it's going to output the more VPL exercises you successfully complete, the higher your chances of obtaining a perfect practical mark. Else output, keep it up. So you have to choose one of two options, and that's what a conditional operator helps with. You see that there's the first option here for when it's true, and there's the second option here for when it's false. So you choose one of the two options. So a ternary operator is perfect. And if you look at the question, they want us to return something. In this case, it's a string. So that's reason number 2 for you to use the ternary operator. So let's use the ternary operator, right? So let's ask the question. And we need to store the string, the response, because you see that it's a string. How do I know it's a string? If you look carefully, right, you need to zoom in. You see this double quotes over here, right? That's the start of a string. And then if you scroll down, there's the end of the string. So I know it's a string. So I'm going to go back to my code blocks and then I'm going to ask the question. And I need to remember what I told you about the ternary, the conditional operator, or another word for it is ternary operator. it returns a specific value, whether that's an integer or a char or a double, it returns. So I need to store whatever is returned into a variable. So I'm going to say this is the message, right? So that's the message. And then, so let me do this. So what is the question, right? So I need to put the question there. The question is that my number of VPL exercises or number of exercises, is it actually less than 5? So let's check. Yeah, is it less than 5? If it is, then output that long string. So let's ask that question. Is number of exercises less than 5? Question mark. And then we handle for when that question is true. And then we also return something when the question is false. So let's do that. So when the question is true, I need to return some string. But since that string is very long, you are allowed to put this in a separate line. So I would advise you do this, right? You put it in a separate line and then you pass your string in there because it's quite a long string. So let me show you that this string is actually indeed long. So you see it's from here to there, right? And then I'm going to copy and then go back to code blocks and and then right click and then paste. So you see how long that string is, right? It goes up until there. That's how long the string is. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so it's a very long string. So I'm also going to press enter again so that we can see everything. Yeah, this is a weird. Okay, let's do it this way. Let me separate it, right? So let me do this. Yeah, it's a problem. So let's leave it. Let's leave it as a long string. That's fine. We have no choice. And then else, when it's false, we need to return another string, which is keep it up. So I need to copy that, keep it up. Okay, it's fine. I'll put the full stop after pasting. So paste there, dot, keep it up, right? Then we need to output that response. So output that message. So message, and then I'll need to put an end of line character so that my output looks good. So let me zoom out a bit so that you can see it. The thing is, the string is too long, right? So my code is going to become very long. But in full, you're supposed to write in this way, like this, there. See how long the string is. And then you have the false part when it's false. So I hope you can see. So we asked this question, is the number of exercises less than 5? Question mark. That's the question we're asking. If the number of exercises is indeed less than 5, we're going to output that long string there. Else, if it's not less than 5, if it's not less than 5, what does it mean? It means that it's at least 5 and above, so 5 to infinite. So it's going to tell you, keep up the good work, basically. So I'm going to leave it like that, even though it's a very long message, but that's how they want you to do the practical. That's the message you should display. So I'm going to build and run, and then we're going to run option B. We're going to test the option B. So B, enter the number of VPL exercises. Let me say 4. So you see that message, it says the more VPL exercises you've successfully complete, the higher your chances of obtaining a perfect practical mark. So yeah, and then let's try entering a bigger value, like at least greater than 5. So option B, let me say you did 10, all 10 of them. 10, you see, it tells you, keep it up. And then that's pretty much the solution for this practical. And your practical this week is exactly the same thing. If I'm to be honest with you, it's exactly the same thing. So I've actually given you guys the memo. You just need to change it in a way that applies to your practical. So basically, the ranges are different, the strings are different, but then you still have option A, you still have option B. So you still have 2 options. So this is basically how they expected you to do the practical last if you're doing ComSci last year, because this is the last year, this is last year's practical. So that's pretty much all you had to do here. You tell the user to choose one of the options, then you list the options and explain what each option does. So what would happen if you choose that option? So you need to clarify to the user. And then once you clarified, use a switch statement, because we know we are C++ programmers. We know that switch statements are applicable for scenarios whereby you have to choose from certain you have to choose from specific at least from a specific list of options, right? That's where a switch statement is very useful. So we use that if statement. Then to check the score for ranges, we use an if statement because it's a better tool, because you cannot do the ranges using a switch statement. So that's why we opted for an if statement. And if you try to do the ranges using a ternary operator, yeah, it's gonna become very problematic. So this is the easiest way, is to use if statements. So this is how you're supposed to do it. I'll upload, okay, I'll just send you guys the zipped file, this code. I'm gonna send you guys in the in our group chat. That if you're just make sure you're in the group chat. That's the only way you can have access to this code. So I'm gonna send it in our group chat. Then you can look at the code and do whatever you want to do. But one thing that you need to really think about: do not copy and paste this code, because if you try to be a clever, right? You try to be smart. Someone else in your class is trying the exact same thing, and both of you are gonna have copy on Eve. It's gonna show copy. And at UJ, if you get at least 3 copies, they're gonna call you in the offices and have a special meeting with you. A very special meeting. I don't want to discuss what they will discuss, because you will see it for yourself when you go to that meeting. So it's not worth it. Don't try to copy. Don't copy and paste and just submit. And even if you try to copy and paste, it's a different problem. So yeah, you still can't copy and paste. You'd have to change it and understand your own problem and change the different ranges and stuff. So at least I think it's a good idea to always do previous year's practicals, because if you do the memo and you send the code, students have a tendency of being so lazy. They're just going to copy and paste. And then when you copy and paste, someone else in class is just going to copy and paste. And then and then it's going to show copy on Eve. Basically, they're saying that you guys copied from each other, of which that's how it looks, because you can't have the exact same variable, the way you named your variables, and the exact same comments. No, that's impossible. People don't think the same. You'd be surprised how different people are. All of your codes, even though the solution might be one solution, people do think the different things. For example, I did my if statement this way. Someone else is going to do the if statement this way. You see that it's two different things, but it's exactly the same answer. Maybe I use the backslash n, someone use ENDL. So you see, there's many ways to solve this thing. So you guys can't possibly all think the same. So that's it for today's tutorial. At least you guys you have no stress about the practical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop recording so that I'm going to take questions from you guys, because people might be shy. They might like, I don't want people to hear my voice when they listen to recording. So it's fine. Let me stop recording.